How's it going, everybody? I hope you're all doing well. So, in the world of the Greek tragedians like Aeschylus and Sophocles, when somebody's committed a great wrong, when some natural boundary or some law of the gods is transgressed, it causes more than just immediate damage. What it does is it unleashes a kind of spiritual contamination, or what we translate from the Greek word miasma. It unleashes pollution. And this pollution, it doesn't just affect the individual who committed the wrong. No, it spreads out to families and to cities, and it even spills out over into future generations where the sins of the parents carry down to the children. Now we see some of this, for example, in Sophocles' plays Antigone and in Oedipus Rex. In Antigone, Creon, the king, refuses to bury Polynices, calling him a traitor. But for the ancient Greeks, denying burial is itself a violation. Now when Antigone breaks the law to bury her brother, Creon punishes her. And so what happens? Well, the pollution spreads to his family, to his house, and to his soul. His son dies, his wife dies, and he's left in complete ruin. And in Oedipus Rex, of course, Oedipus unknowingly kills his father and marries his mother. Now this transgression caused a devastating plague to happen in Thebes. And when Oedipus eventually finds out that he's actually the wrongdoer, his mother hangs herself and he stabs his eyes out and he begs for exile. Maybe another way to think about this is that pollution here, you can think of it in terms of being a kind of imbalance. You see, the Greeks saw the world as structured and as ordered, as a cosmos, not a chaos. In other words, everything had its place and its time and its limit. So when humans crossed certain lines by acting hubristically, when they defied the gods or broke sacred bonds, they didn't just sin. No, they disrupted the natural or divine order. So in this way, pollution is a kind of disharmony. It's a tear in the fabric of human and cosmic life. Okay, so now here's the thing. To restore this balance, this imbalance needs to be recognized and acknowledged and in some way purified and set right. In other words, the truth must come to light and the guilty must suffer and the community must face up to what's been done. And crucially, none of this is free from suffering. In fact, for the tragedians, this is why suffering is so important and so meaningful to them. It's because ultimately suffering isn't punishment. No, it's the medicinal fire that burns away ignorance and arrogance and invisible guilt. It's how individuals and societies learn how to live rightly again. This is why Sophocles says that to suffer is to learn, and that we must suffer our way into truth. Now, today, of course, we don't use the term pollution in this way, but that doesn't mean the problem has gone away. In fact, I think you could argue that in our contemporary world, that ancient term is actually more relevant than ever. I mean, think about the environmental crisis, where things like climate change and our plastic-filled oceans and rising temperatures and melting glaciers are the very real empirical consequences of what you could call our collective hubris, of crossing boundaries that we shouldn't have. Just how tolerant will nature, or to go back to Greek mythology, just how tolerant will Gaia, the ordered biosphere, how tolerant will she be of our excesses? Just how much strain can we put on the earth? In other words, For decades, we've acted like the natural world is ours to dominate and to extract from and to exploit with no consequence. But that cost is now coming due. And not just that, but our children are the ones who have to pay the price. Like in Greek tragedy, we're beginning to suffer not just small pockets of disruption, but a spreading contamination that doesn't discriminate, that in one way or another touches everything and everyone. And it's not just environmental damage that I'm talking about, but also a kind of moral and spiritual exhaustion that goes with it. A deep sense that we've tipped the scales and destroyed something fundamental. And now we're living with the fallout. And it's not just nature. There's a kind of social pollution too. What I mean is that there's a contamination of trust and of truth and of connection. The lies and the misinformation that flood our media and politics and the fragmentation of community, these are clearly signs of another kind of imbalance, another kind of hidden contagion. And what's the imbalance here exactly? Well, certainly a massive part of it is the building of societies on unchecked technological domination and on the greed and the speed and the ego that drives it. I mean, AI, for instance, as Heidegger in his own way foresaw many decades ago, is already shaping the way that we think and how we feel and how we relate to the world. It automates not just labor, but human thinking itself. The danger isn't just dystopian robots with agency and the potential to wipe us out, although that's not unreasonable. But in terms of right now, it's the completely voluntary outsourcing of our judgments and our memories and the algorithmic manipulation of our desires. This is a reckless and a blind faith in machines. When we don't care about regulation because all we want is short-term profit and power, that's the crossing of a boundary that will be hard to come back from. Well, if Sophocles were around today, he'd tell us that there is no easy purification here. And that ultimately, the only real path forward lies through an honest confrontation with truth and with humility and a willingness to suffer the very real consequences. This will be a long process of restoration on the personal and the social and the planetary level, if a planet still exists at all. Bye for now.